are listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, I have the opportunity to interview Gina Mundy. Gina, an attorney, is the author of A Parent's Guide to Safer Childbirth, a must-read book for expecting parents. I'm here with Gina Mundy, who is an attorney and the author of A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth. Gina, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Thank you, Aaron, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. Like you said, my name's Gina Mundy, and I have been a childbirth attorney for over 20 years now. And what that is basically if something happens during the birth of a child, the baby is not born healthy, and there is a lawsuit, that is then filed or whatnot, then I'm one of the attorneys for the case. So I've done this for, as I said, over 20 years, and when I get these cases in, it's kind of my job to say, okay, what went wrong, why, and more importantly, what decisions could have been made so baby could have been born healthy. And in some sad cases, unfortunately, mom doesn't make it through childbirth. So anyway, I took this 20 years of experience, trying to answer those questions has taken me across the United States more than once, meeting with various members of a delivery team, doctors, midwives, nurses, and just, hashing out every single aspect of labor and delivery and going through decision making and all that. So based upon that experience, I wrote a book to parents. And it's called, like you said, A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth. So basically, instead of getting involved in the aftermath of a mistake or a complication where something went wrong, I'm trying to get involved now before childbirth in hopes that we can prevent some of these complications and mistakes.
Now, without spoiling too much of your book, A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth, you've already given a basic introduction, but is there anything more that you can add about your book that wouldn't spoil too much of it?
Oh, you know what? It's one of those books that I'm willing to spoil because I'm just trying to get this information out there. But basically, chapter 1 are all of the lessons that, I've taken from the cases over the years. So whether it's a lesson from the families, who lost a baby or who lost a mom, or whether it's from one of the, doctors or nurses, or maybe it's one a lesson from one of the medical experts. That's chapter 1. And actually that, if you know anyone who's expecting, that chapter is actually so important. I have it on my website at ginamundy.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. And they can download it for free. Because if you know these lessons as an expecting parent or an expecting grandparent, you definitely be sitting pretty. And then what I did is each one of the lessons in chapter 1 is then a subsequent chapter. So the first lesson would then be chapter 2, second lesson is chapter 3, and that's when I elaborate on it and say, okay, if this happens during your labor and delivery, this is what you need to know, this is what you need to think about, and so forth. But what makes probably my book different than any other pregnancy book or book on childbirth is that, I have different content, different information, because remember, I'm an attorney. I have no medical training. So this is, it's a different perspective. So for instance, chapter 11, I go through the 10 most common facts and issues, in a legal baby case, because unfortunately, there are some reoccurring issues in these cases. And at least if families know about them, it will help, bring awareness. It'll help them have an understanding of, what's important, what's not important, and whatnot. For instance, hands down, the number one most common factor issue in my cases is a drug called Pitocin. So Pitocin stimulates mom's uterus, so it contracts, and that kind of kickstarts labor. So it's called inducing labor. But that drug is in most of my cases. So if mom, dad, grandpa, whatever, anyone, any family members know mom is getting a Pitocin induction, well, now you know that that is, when mistakes happen, complications occur. Unfortunately, when that happens, like I said, a lot of times baby doesn't make it, or, there's an injury to baby that's permanent, or sometimes even mom. So then in my book, it would solve, how to have, a safe Pitocin induction because I've seen the mistakes and whatnot for the past 20 years. So yeah, it not only identifies some issues, but it solves everything because I started writing this for my kids. I have older daughters now. And so something had happened in our family where it made me think of, what if I wasn't around for the birth of my grandkids? Because, childbirth and labor and delivery is, it's been my life for over 20 years. So that's why I started writing everything down. And, once I went from attorney to author, I mean, what we learned from these cases is just invaluable. So that's, you know, probably a good nutshell. And like I said, if any of your listeners want to head over, like download that chapter 1 for free, and that's really a good outline of what you need to know heading into childbirth. So that's it.
Is a Parent's Guide to Safer Childbirth, is that self-published, traditionally published, or was it published via a hybrid press?
Oh, I self-published. So yeah, I made that decision. I don't know, pretty early on. I weighed both of my options, and these days, with everything out there and the resources available to self-published authors, I figured I'd try it. And then, listen, if it doesn't take off like I wanted it to, or I need some more air support from a publisher, highly unlikely. But if I did, it'd be easier to self-publish and then switch over versus, obviously the other way around. So yeah, no, I made that decision pretty early. So I figured I also wanted to write a book that was timeless. This is childbirth, this is labor. It's literally, my job has been the same for 20 years. So this is not only a book that will benefit the moms today, but it's going to benefit the moms of tomorrow, the next generation. So, there's also, I have children too. So, it's versus giving my, royalties to a publishing company, be something I could, leave my kids with.
As you've self-published your book, and you're more willing than most of the authors on here to spoil large sections of your book, how do you effectively market your book?
Oh, yeah, listen, I wrote my book to save babies. So if that means spoiling my book, I'm good. No, I just out there with marketing the book. I mean, I think their go-to has been Amazon ads, and then also getting on the different podcasts. I notice sometimes a podcast will air, and boom, I'll have a bunch of book sales, and I'll be like, nice. So, and it's different podcasts. Like I'm here, this is more of an author podcast. So, but because I'm here talking about my book and my experience, someone else who's an author may have a daughter, sister, brother, whoever, who's expecting. So just even jumping, it doesn't really matter what kind of podcast, because also it's, the fact of taking, 20 years experience and trying to, writing a book about that was interesting. But yeah, just getting social media. So I've always been an extremely private person. So this one's a little difficult for me, but just trying to get out there now on social media. And then when you're like a local author, I know in my community, I'm in Michigan, the papers, magazines are all over it. So just getting some articles out there. And again, I'll see an article will come out on me, whether it's the paper, a magazine, and then I look at the sales, and boom, more book sales. So, but I think everybody's on the same page here with, anything that they can do to make sure that we have some, healthy babies. Because I'll tell you, the families in the cases, you're never the same. If you lose a mom or a baby, precious little life to something that, could have been preventable, it's you're forever changed. So, just getting the word out and organically, and I wrote the book for my kids so they would have, a safe, my grandkids would be nice and healthy. So it's funny, I'm seeing a lot of grandmas who actually like my book, because just, I wrote it kind of to keep my grandkids safe. They're reading it for the same reason. So that's been kind of cool, because even though I really did write it to expecting parents, I'm figuring out pretty quick that it's actually grandparents that, when you put all of this stuff in there, um, they're the ones that really want to know, and they want to step in and not only protect their kids, but their, future grandkids. So it's even just trying to identify the market, who's really buying the book and whatnot. But those are probably, I don't know, podcasts are just huge. So anytime you can get on a podcast and talk about your book, especially if you have like a mission behind it, I think it really helps.
What are some secrets behind writing a good nonfiction book?
Time and passion. Um, so writing the book ended up being therapy for me that I didn't even know I needed. Um, you know, when you deal with, or, you have to say, dead baby, dead mom, brain damage, when you say those every day of your life, it actually impacts you in ways you could never imagine. And so when I started writing the book, I had to go back through my cases and remember all of the families and where are they at now. And the crying started for about 3 months, and it didn't, it was every day. I couldn't stop. I'm still a partner at a law firm. I'm a mom of 3 kids. I'm a wife of a very busy business owner. Like, I wrote my book starting at 3 a.m. every single day for 14 months. So those first 3 months, there was a lot of crying, a lot of tears. But as I wrote, I knew that I could take their stories and I could take, what they had gone through to try to help prevent this in the future. And I knew and I know I had the knowledge to do it. So once the crying stopped, clarity hit, those emotions were like this catalyst that just pushed me to where when it was 3 a.m. every single day for 14 months, I was excited because I knew that I was going to, write something that, will help families. So I had this passion and this drive, that I can't really explain. But when you have that, I think the words flow better. And I would sit like I was talking to my kids when I'd come up to, an issue that had to be solved. So, almost like having your avatar, like who are you writing this to and what do they need to know? So, there's the passion and then the time. My book took me thousands of hours all day long. And towards the end, it was weekends. I started taking some time off work. Family got pushed aside. I mean, there is thousands of hours in this book. So I think it's passion, it's time. You have to give up a lot. Friends and family didn't see me for 14 months. It was, it is what it is. So, and then of course now I'm out marketing the book and no one still sees me. But it's okay. Everyone's used to it. And because of, you know, what the book ended up being and whatnot, everything everybody understands. But yeah, I think you're giving things up that maybe are hard to do, knowing that it's temporary, putting in the time and having that passion behind it. And your passion or someone's passion can be much different than mine. But if you can get something like that just to fuel you every single day, game over.
What are some common mistakes, whether it be made by medical professionals or others, that are made during the labor and delivery processes?
So, I think chapter 11, as we talked about, there's the common ones. So, a busy labor and delivery unit, unfortunately, is very common when mistakes are made or there's complications. So think about it. Babies come when they want to come. So, a labor and delivery unit can become overwhelmed pretty quick, especially in a highly populated area. And when that happens, you have the delivery teams that are running hard and they're thin. So when that happens, they can't stay at the patient's bedside like they probably want to. And when they're not at the bedside or they don't have, the full undivided attention, things get overlooked. Maybe there's a delay. In the book, I have a really sad story. Now it's very general. It's not, it's just there to get the point across. But I had a mom get to labor and delivery. She was term, and there were some concerns about the baby, but then everybody was reassured that baby was going to be okay. So the very busy team left the room, and when they came back, they couldn't find the baby's heart rate. So let me back up just a little bit so the story makes more sense. You gotta remember, baby is inside mom. Baby's in the uterus. You can't look at baby like you can look at mom and make a diagnosis of some kind or whatnot. If you look at mom and you're like, you're not looking great, you look a little swollen or you're in pain, doctor, nurse will be like, what's wrong? What's going on? Mom communicates back, they figure it out. Babies, just very different. But one way that they can tell if baby's okay during labor is by looking at their heart rate. So, for instance, I'm a non-medical person. I can look at a baby's heart rate and I can tell you if baby is struggling or if baby's a rock star. Anyway, so I talk about that in the book a lot, having an idea of your baby's heart rate, because I had a doctor testify, really, the only way a baby can talk to a doctor, is through their heart rate. That means whoever can understand their heart rate or at least have a good idea on what it means, it's like the baby can talk to them. Anyway, so there were concerns about the baby when they started the baby's heart rate. Again, like I said, they became reassured that the baby would be okay. And when the team was gone, the heart rate stopped graphing. And the family was in the room. Family just did not understand at that point the importance of making sure that heart rate graphs so they could watch baby. Now, this is in my book. You gotta, if there are any concerns, you got to keep the heart rate going, and if it's not, you need to notify the delivery team. But anyway, they did not, notify anybody. And then when some of the team members came back and they tried to find the baby's heart rate, they couldn't. And that's because the baby had actually passed away during labor. So, there's just things like that, probably more so that was just a busy labor and delivery unit, because I can tell you, if the delivery teams, the doctors, nurses, midwives, if there's any concerns about the baby, they're on it. They're going to prioritize, that patient versus maybe a mom who's stalled out in labor and she's not progressing anymore. So, but, you have to have, families have to have an understanding, and that's one of the lessons about childbirth. So it's more like they can work with their delivery team. Like, hey, I know you're busy, eyes are off, but, we know that the baby, the heart rate needs to be graphing. If you could please help us, great. If then they readjusted it, maybe figure out, oh, okay, baby's not doing great, and then they'll move and take the next steps. So, I think there's two lessons right there. Just number one, you got to know what to do if you walk into a busy labor and delivery unit. Number two, that really would include having an understanding of childbirth and exactly what you need to know so you can work with your delivery team and make sure that baby arrives safely. Another lesson or mistake, I don't know if it's so much mistake, it's more of a common fact in a legal case is probably the best way to say it, But um, most mistakes and complications occur after mom's water breaks. So there's the amniotic fluid surrounding baby. That's, the water. And basically, as labor gets going or whatnot, sometimes the doctor will, break a mom's water. Sometimes it occurs naturally. But once that happens, that's when, you have to have all eyes on baby, make sure baby's doing okay, because for those, months before, baby's in their comfy, environment. And, now once the water rushes out, everything's changing. So, um, it's just important that that would be another key. Okay, well, we got to make sure we have an eye on baby and whatnot. So, I mean, those are some of the, I think, important lessons. Pitocin, busy labor and delivery unit, knowing that complications arise more so after your water breaks, and that really, as parents, you need to prepare for childbirth and have an understanding of what you're walking into, because everybody's expecting a baby these days, and it's like, oh, let's get the nursery ready. Let's get some nice outfits for baby, some really cute clothes, and what kind of diapers are we going to use? And there's a lot of preparing for when baby comes home, but I can tell you my experience, there needs to be enough time to spent preparing for childbirth. And when you do that, you can do it in the comfort of your own home. You can text, you can call, you can, you know, do it, do what you need to do, versus when you get to the hospital and they're trying to give you options and you're just trying to make decisions. And, you enter into, when you go into labor, it's like, I've had the kids, and while I went into labor with the first one, I didn't for the other ones. But you go into it, you're just in a completely different state of mind. It's the one time in life where you're okay to be in pain. So, so getting ready for that time is very important. But I would say those are probably the top lessons.
As an attorney, you often get involved in childbirth cases before there is a difficult childbirth. Why do you get involved before a mother goes into childbirth, and how do you avoid being seen as an ambulance chaser?
Oh, well, that's easy. I'm actually not an attorney for the families. I'm actually the attorney for the hospital, the doctors, the nurses, the midwives, residents. So I'm not the ambulance chaser chasing the families. So
Okay.
so that one's easy. Um, but my goal is just to prevent these mistakes from happening. Um, so that's why I'm trying to get involved before. I'm just trying to give parents, just the knowledge that they need to help them, because, um, basically, I think my kids are, when it comes to childbirth and whatnot, they'll be prepared in a much different way because I'm their mom. So everything with them is gonna be a lot different than maybe how, a normal family may prepare for childbirth, because of what I've seen and what I know. So basically, the more of the decision to, you know, put that book out there, so not only will, my kids benefit, and my grandkids, but other families too.
Oh, I thought you represent like patient side of court cases. You actually represent like the sides of medical institutions and professionals.
No, it's interesting because in the podcast, so a lot of times before I start a podcast, I've actually started telling everybody that, because everyone seems very confused. I wrote a book to the families when I'm the hospital's attorney. So no, it's you listen, the doctors and when you're involved in childbirth and bringing new life into the world. I mean, no, they don't want these mistakes or complications to occur. So that's they want parents. I had a labor and delivery nurse read my book before it was published, just to get her opinion on it. And I'll never forget that day she called me and she was like, if every parent knew this stuff, she's like, it would make my job so much easier. Everything would be more smooth. They would understand. She wants it to be like mandatory reading. And I'm like, okay. So, that's it's not but it's interesting. Most people who do not know me, um, and where I'm a guest on a show or whatnot. Yes. And it's funny when we started, I forgot to tell you, and look where it got me. So, you know, it's yeah, interesting.
Now, my final question is about work-life balance. How did you balance writing a book, being a partner in a law firm, being a mother of 3 children, and being the wife of a business owner?
It's very difficult. And you should add in there, I still work out most days. No. So basically, like I said, I had to start operating basically in the middle of the night when the world is sleeping. That was definitely a key. So, and I had to give up give up stuff. So maybe those fun times that I used to have, we don't really have them anymore. But my family is my priority, and spending time with them and whatnot. So basically, I had to make the decision that I pretty much go to bed at like 7 o'clock every day. So I make dinner or we have dinner, and then my husband takes over. That's been his job. He then has to, make sure the kids are in bed, ready for the next day, and then I'm up at 3, doing what I do. But I never woke up never thought in a million years I would ever wake up at 3 a.m. and work. Like it's whatnot. It's hard. And I'll tell you, it's not the easiest. Especially when I got near publishing date, and then this summer, my book was published in June of this summer, June 2023, and last week my son's sitting there in front of my desk crying, saying, "I want my mom back." So I'm doing my best, but it's still hard. And I promised him, how the book's going and stuff like that. There's stuff, and I understand things. There's going to be stuff where now I'm going to be able to delegate. So at my firm, I have people under me who help me, and assistants, secretaries, legal assistants. Same thing with the book world. I need to hire people and then delegate. And I've always had a hard time doing that, especially when something's so new. So delegating, I think, is huge. And just setting your schedule and then sticking with it, and just doing your best. There's a lot of times we sit down to watch a family movie, and I just fall over. I just fall right asleep. I can't. So it's but I know that there is the book's out. There's an end in sight, but it's interesting. It's not easy, but if you know that going in, and you try to do your best, it'll work out. I know, and this time next year I'm going to be in a much different place, meaning probably have more time with the family and and whatnot. I'll have my processes in place and all that good stuff.
Gina, you were a wonderful guest for this podcast, and I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author Podcast.
Aw, thank you, Aaron, for having me. You're doing some great work out there for authors, and I watched your YouTube videos, and yeah, you're pretty amazing. So having me on meant a lot. So thank you very much.
Gina was a wonderful guest to interview, and I'll make sure to put a link to her website in the text description of the episode. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACScribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.